The descent Kale's flashlight beam carved through the suffocating darkness of Sector 7 underground, revealing rusted turnstiles and peeling advertisement posters from a world that no longer existed. The Great Blackout had claimed more than just the city's power grid. It had swallowed entire districts whole, leaving behind only whispered stories and government warnings to stay away. But warnings had never deterred urban explorers like him. His boots crunched on scattered debris as he navigated deeper into the station. Emergency lighting strips, their batteries somehow still clinging to life after 10 years, flickered sporadically along the platform walls. Each intermittent flash revealed glimpses of a place frozen in time. Abandoned coffee cups still sitting on benches, newspapers yellowed with age scattered across the tracks, and the ghostly outlines of people's final moments before evacuation. Air hung thick with the metallic taste of rust and something else, something organic, that made his stomach turn. Mold, perhaps, or worse. The city had sealed these tunnels for good reason, claiming structural instability and toxic gas leaks. Yet here he stood, driven by the same compulsion that had led him into dozens of abandoned places before. The need to witness what others feared to see. As Kale approached the platform's edge, preparing to descend onto the tracks, a sound froze. Him mid-step. Soft, rhythmic, unmistakably human. Someone was crying. The sound echoed from somewhere deep within the tunnel system, bouncing off curved walls, until it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. His rational mind offered explanations. Acoustic tricks, old recordings still playing on damaged speakers, or perhaps another explorer like himself. But the crying held a quality that recordings couldn't capture. Raw emotion that resonated in his chest, making his heart ache with inexplicable sympathy. Hello? His voice cracked the silence like a gunshot. The crying paused, then resumed. With renewed intensity, as if responding to his call, Kale's hand trembled as he adjusted his flashlight's beam, illuminating the tunnel mouth ahead. Warning signs in multiple languages plastered the entrance. Danger unstable. Structure. Authorized personnel only. Toxic atmosphere. But beneath the official warnings, someone had scrawled newer messages in white chalk. She's still here. Don't listen. Turn back. The crying continued, neither growing louder nor fading, maintaining the same heartbreaking consistency that suggested genuine distress. Someone needed help, someone trapped in this forsaken place for who knew how long. The thought of abandoning a person in need violated every principle Kale held dear. He took his first step onto the tracks, then another. The sound seemed to acknowledge his movement, shifting subtly as if guiding him forward. Behind him, the platform's emergency lights flickered one final time before dying completely, sealing his commitment to whatever lay ahead in the absolute darkness of the underground. The crying called to him. And despite every instinct screaming warnings, Kale followed. The hunt 20 minutes into the tunnel, Kale's flashlight revealed the first anomaly. Symbols drawn in what appeared to be ash, covering the curved walls in intricate patterns that hurt to look at directly. They weren't graffiti too precise, too purposeful. The lines seemed to writhe in his peripheral vision, forming shapes that suggested meaning just beyond comprehension. The crying had grown clearer without becoming louder, an impossible acoustic phenomenon that left him constantly turning his head, searching for its source. Sometimes it seemed to come from ahead, other times from the maintenance passages that branched off like arteries from the main tunnel. The sound possessed an almost magnetic quality, pulling him forward despite the growing wrongness of his surroundings. His footsteps echoed strangely here, each one seeming to return as 3 or 4 distinct sounds, as if the tunnel itself was multiplying his presence. The air had grown thicker, carrying scents that shifted between familiar and alien. Sometimes flowers, sometimes decay, sometimes something metallic that reminded him of blood. A junction appeared ahead, splitting the tunnel in 3 directions. The crying seemed to emanate from all of them simultaneously, a chorus of the same voice at slightly different intervals. Cale paused, consulting the faded transit map on his phone. According to the city records, this junction shouldn't exist. Sector 7 had been a simple 2-track system with no major branches. He chose the center path, guided by instinct more than logic. The walls here were different, covered in a substance that gleamed weightily in his flashlight beam. When he reached out to touch it, his fingers came away clean, though the sensation lingered cold and somehow aware. "Please," he called out, his voice carrying forward into the darkness. "I'm here to help. Where are you?" The crying paused, then began again with a different quality, hopeful, perhaps even grateful. It was definitely closer now, though the tunnel stretched endlessly ahead. Strange shadows danced at the edge of his light, never quite resolving into recognizable shapes when he turned to examine them directly. The walls began to narrow, forcing Cale to duck as the ceiling lowered. The ash symbols grew denser here, covering every available surface in their incomprehensible script. Some seemed fresh, as if drawn moments before his arrival. Others had been worn smooth by time or repeated touching, their original meaning lost. To entropy, a maintenance door appeared on his left, hanging open on broken hinges. The crying seemed to beckon from within, stronger and more immediate. Cale squeezed through the narrow opening, finding himself in a small chamber filled with rusted equipment and dangling cables. The sound was so close now, he expected to see its source around every corner. Yet the room remained empty except for shadows and the lingering sense of recent presence. On the far wall, someone had written in the same white chalk he'd seen at the tunnel entrance, "She's waiting. She's been waiting so long. Don't leave her alone again." The crying intensified, becoming almost conversational in its rhythm, as if trying to communicate through tears alone. Cale felt tears of his own threatening to fall. The sound was so profoundly sad, so achingly lonely, that his empathy threatened to overwhelm his caution. He pressed forward through another narrow passage, following the sound deeper into the station's forgotten depths. The contact the passage opened into a vast chamber Cale's map insisted couldn't exist. His flashlight beam disappeared into darkness, above and to all sides, revealing only fragments of what might once have been a grand terminal. Broken columns rose like skeletal fingers, supporting nothing but shadow. The crying echoed from everywhere now, surrounding him in stereo sorrow that made his skin crawl with sympathetic distress. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically from unseen sources, casting brief glimpses of architectural impossibilities. Staircases that led nowhere, platforms suspended in mid-air, and doorways that opened onto empty space. The ash symbols covered everything here, layer upon layer of meaning that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. "I'm here," Cale called out, his voice small in the enormous space. "Please, let me help you. Where are you?" The crying stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so complete he could hear his own heartbeat. Then, from directly ahead, came a new sound: footsteps. Light and hesitant, moving toward him across the unseen floor dot, his beam found her at 20 feet. A girl who might have been 16, dressed in a school uniform that had once been white, but now carried stains that could have been anything. Her dark hair hung in tangled curtains around a face he couldn't quite see, shadows clinging to her features like a protective veil. She stood perfectly still, head tilted as if listening for something he couldn't hear. "Are you hurt?" Cale took a step forward, his voice gentle. "How long have you been down here?" The girl raised her head slightly, and for a moment he thought he glimpsed her eyes' dark wells that reflected his flashlight beam like still water. Then she spoke, her voice carrying the same achingly lonely quality as her tears. "You came back," she whispered, I knew you would come back eventually. You always do. I've never been here before, Cale said carefully, instinct warning him that something was fundamentally wrong. What's your name? How did you get trapped down here? Trapped? The girl laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I'm not trapped. This is where I belong now. This is where we all belong, eventually. She stepped closer, and his flashlight revealed more details he wished he hadn't seen. Her uniform wasn't just stained, it was torn in ways that suggested violence. Dark patches covered her arms and legs, and when she moved, he heard sounds. Like wet leaves rustling. You shouldn't be here, he said, backing away despite every instinct to help. This place isn't safe. Let me get you out. Out? Her voice carried genuine confusion. But you just got here. You can't leave again. Not when I've been so lonely. The temperature plummeted suddenly, his breath forming clouds in air that moments before had been warm and stagnant. The emergency lights flickered faster now, creating a strobe effect that made the girl's movements seem jerky and unnatural. With each flash, she appeared closer, though he hadn't seen her move. Please, Cale whispered, his back hitting a cold wall he hadn't known was there. I just want to help. You will, the girl said, now close enough that he could smell her flowers mixed with something rotten. You'll help me not be alone anymore. She raised one pale hand toward him, fingers extended in a gesture that might have been pleading. Or grasping. In the stuttering light, her fingertips looked wrong, too long, too sharp, stained with something dark. Against every rational thought, Cale found himself reaching out to meet her touch. The revelation, the moment their fingers made. Contact, the world exploded into clarity, so sharp it felt like knives behind his eyes. Cale saw everything, not just the girl before him, but the truth of what she had become, what this place had made of her during 10 years of solitude and gradual transformation. She had been human once. Jenny Morrison, age 16, caught in the transit system when the great blackout hit. Not an accident, as the city claimed, but something far worse, an experiment in dimensional overlap gone catastrophically wrong. The barriers between realities had thinned in these tunnels, and she had been the first to slip between the cracks. Years of existing partially in spaces that weren't meant for human consciousness had changed her, cell by cell, thought by thought. She remained anchored to this place by will and loneliness, fed by the emotions of anyone brave or foolish enough to venture into her domain. Each explorer who had come before had left something behind: fear, compassion, hope, nutrients that kept her tethered to existence. But the price of remaining had been her humanity itself. Cale felt her hunger like a physical weight, not malicious, but desperate. She didn't want to hurt anyone. She simply needed companionship so badly that she had forgotten how to let go. Her touch was ice-cold and eager, clinging to his warmth with the desperation of someone who had been drowning for a decade. I can see you now, she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that belonged to no human throat. Really see you. You're different from the others. Stronger. You might be able to stay. Through their connection, Cale experienced flashes of her existence. Endless days in the flickering darkness, watching the city's lights fade overhead, feeling the weight of abandonment settle into her bones. The crying had been real years of tears for a world that had moved on without her, for parents who had eventually stopped looking, for a life that had been stolen by forces beyond anyone's control. I'm sorry, he managed, meaning it completely. I'm so sorry this happened to you. It's not your fault, she said, her grip tightening. But you can make it better. You can stay with me. We could explore together, find all the hidden places where reality bends. I know so much now about the spaces between spaces, about the doors that only open in darkness. Cale felt the pull of her offer, the seductive promise of abandoning the world above for something stranger and more immediate. Part of him, the part that had always been drawn to abandoned places and forgotten stories, yearned to accept. But he had learned something from their connection that she either hadn't realized or refused to acknowledge. She was killing this place, just as it was killing her. Her presence was a wound that refused to heal, and every day she remained made it worse. The dimensional instability was growing, spreading upward through the city's infrastructure. Eventually, it would consume everything above, pulling the entire district into the same liminal space that had claimed her. "There's another way," he said quietly, his free hand searching his pocket for the emergency beacon he'd brought. City ordinance for anyone exploring condemned areas. "You don't have to be alone, but you can't stay here. This place is poisoning you." Her expression shifted, shadows deepening around her eyes until they became pools of absolute darkness. "No," she whispered. "I've been here too long. This is who I am now. This is where I belong." The air around them began to vibrate with gathering energy, and Cale realized he had seconds before she made the choice for both of them. The choice Cale activated the emergency beacon with his free hand, its piercing signal cutting through the dimensional static like a blade. The effect was immediate and violent. The shadows around Jenny recoiled as if burned, and the impossible architecture of the chamber began to shift and writhe like a living thing in pain. "No!" Jenny's scream carried the weight of a decade's loneliness, the sound tearing at reality itself. The connection between them flared with desperate intensity as she tried to drag him deeper into her realm. "They'll take you away from me. Everyone leaves." But the beacon's signal was more than just a call for help. It was a lifeline back to the world above, a reminder of electromagnetic frequencies and solid matter and all the mundane miracles of normal reality. Cale felt his own humanity reassert itself, pushing back against the seductive pull of the between spaces. "I won't leave you," he promised, even as his survival instincts screamed at him to run. "But I can't stay like this, and neither can you. Look what this place has done to you. Look what you're becoming." Through their connection, he showed her what he had seen, the spreading dimensional wounds, the way her presence was slowly consuming the city above. She was a cancer in reality's flesh, and her love had become a form of destruction. Jenny's grip loosened slightly, confusion replacing desperation in her impossible eyes. I just wanted someone to stay. I just didn't want to be alone anymore." "You don't have to be," Cale said, extending his other hand toward her, the one not holding the beacon. "But you have to choose to let go. You have to choose to move forward instead of clinging to this place." The chamber shuddered around them, cracks of normal light beginning to appear in the walls as the beacon's signal grew stronger. In the distance, Cale could hear voices rescue teams responding to his emergency call, bringing with them all the weight and warmth of human connection. Jenny looked toward the sounds, her expression cycling through a dozen emotions too quickly to follow. When she turned back to him, her face had changed, still pale, still marked by years of impossible existence, but somehow more human than before. "Will you remember me?" she asked, her voice small and achingly young. "When they take me away from here, will you remember that I existed?" "Always," Cale promised. "I'll tell them about Jenny Morrison. I'll make sure they know you were here, that you mattered, that someone cared enough to come looking." She smiled then, the first truly human expression he had seen from her, and released his hand. The moment their connection broke, the chamber began to collapse, not physically, but dimensionally, reality reasserting itself with violent enthusiasm. The impossible architecture folded in on itself, revealing the much smaller maintenance room it had always been underneath the distortion. Jenny was already fading, the dimensional anchor that had kept her here for so long, finally releasing its hold. But as she dissolved into the returning normalcy, Cale saw something that filled him with unexpected hope. She wasn't disappearing, but transforming, moving from one state of existence to another. The rescue team found him minutes later, unconscious, but alive in a perfectly ordinary underground maintenance room. The official report would list the incident as a case of urban explorer disorientation and mild hypothermia. The dimensional distortions would be attributed to gas leaks and structural instability. But in the weeks that followed, as the station was properly sealed and the surrounding area stabilized, there were reports of other phenomena. Homeless individuals finding unexpected shelter on cold nights, lost children being guided safely home by an unseen presence, and urban explorers like himself discovering hidden messages of hope in the city's forgotten places. Jenny Morrison had finally learned to let go, but she hadn't learned to stop caring. And sometimes, Cale thought as he placed flowers at the memorial he had convinced the city to erect. That was exactly what the world needed. Someone who cared enough to reach back from whatever came after, offering help to those still struggling. In the darkness, he never returned to the underground, but he didn't need to. The crying had stopped, replaced by something infinitely more precious. The quiet satisfaction of a promise kept and a soul finally at peace.